The scratching woke me again. That subtle, persistent sound, like fingernails dragging across drywall, always most audible in those liminal moments between consciousness and sleep. 3 weeks in this house, and already I'd begun cataloging its noises. The asthmatic wheeze of the heating system, the midnight symphony of pipes expanding, and now this scratching that seemed to emanate from within the walls themselves. I came to Pine Street House out of financial desperation. Graduate school stipends barely covered ramen noodles, let alone Boston rent prices. When I found the listing, $600 for a room in a Victorian home with 5 other tenants, I signed the lease within hours, ignoring the property's obvious neglect and the landlord's shifty eyes as he rushed through the tour. "It's just the house settling," my neighbor Emma had explained when I first mentioned the scratching. But houses don't settle with such rhythmic intention. Houses don't leave wet footprints in hallways at 3 a.m. The first time I saw him was a Tuesday. I'd stumbled to the bathroom half asleep, noticing too late the sliver of yellow light beneath the kitchen door. I paused, listening. No clattering dishes, no microwave hum, just the sound of someone breathing, heavy, labored breathing. When I pushed the door open, I caught only his silhouette, tall, unnaturally thin, shoulders hunched beneath a tattered robe. He stood motionless before the open refrigerator, his back to me. I cleared my throat. He didn't turn, didn't speak, just slowly closed the refrigerator door and shuffled toward the basement stairs. The door clicked shut behind him. I mentioned him at breakfast the next morning. My housemates exchanged glances, but said nothing until Emma finally muttered something about the landlord's arrangement. When I pressed further, they changed the subject. The wet footprints appeared 3 days later, large, bare feet tracking from the bathroom to my bedroom door. I followed them, heart pounding against my ribs. They stopped precisely at my threshold, as if someone had stood there, watching me sleep. The moisture hadn't fully dried. This had happened recently. Within the hour, my door had no lock. That night, I wedged a chair beneath the doorknob and lay awake until dawn, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. In the gray morning light, I examined the footprints again. They had dried into faint outlines, like fossils pressed into the wooden floorboards. I began researching the house's history. The library's microfiche revealed nothing extraordinary, just a century of unremarkable ownership transfers. But the barista at the coffee shop 2 blocks away recognized my address immediately. "The Whitaker place," she said, lowering her voice despite the empty cafe. "You live there?" According to local gossip, the landlord, Richard Whitaker, had an older brother with problems. The brother had lived in the main house until an incident, the details of which the barista couldn't or wouldn't share, after which he was supposedly institutionalized. That was 15 years ago. 15 years, yet the basement door remained perpetually locked, and the utilities bill included charges for electricity and heat that far exceeded what our common areas required. That night, I waited until 2 a.m. before retrieving the bobby pin I'd taken from Emma's bathroom. The basement lock was simple, yielding with minimal resistance. The stairwell beyond was pitch black, the air thick with mildew and something else, something metallic and organic. My phone's flashlight revealed a surprisingly finished space, a twin bed, a desk with neat stacks of paper, hundreds of drawings pinned to the walls, architectural sketches of our house, each rendered with obsessive precision. In every drawing, the same window was circled in red, my window. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard the basement door open Richard Whittaker stood at the threshold, his expression unreadable in the darkness. Behind him loomed the taller figure I'd glimpsed in the kitchen. In the dim light, I could finally see his face, gaunt, with deeply shadowed eyes that reflected no light. But what struck me most was the resemblance. The same sharp nose, the same thin lips. They could have been the same person separated by 30 years. "You shouldn't be down here, Tenant," Richard said softly. I noticed he didn't call me by name, though I'd signed a year-long lease. "Some spaces aren't for you." My mouth went dry as the taller figure leaned down to whisper something in Richard's ear. Richard nodded slowly. "He thinks you've been watching him," Richard said, "through the walls, with cameras." He paused. "Have you?" I denied it, my voice cracking. As I edged past them up the stairs, neither made any move to stop me. I packed that night, sweat beading on my forehead despite the room's chill. Every shadow seemed to shift and lengthen as I moved. The scratching in the walls grew louder, more frantic, as if something was trying to claw its way through the plaster. Sleep eventually claimed me, though I fought against it. When I opened my eyes again, the room was different. The air felt charged, dense with presence. My gaze moved sluggishly to the foot of my bed. He stood perfectly still, a kitchen knife gleaming dully in his right hand. His left hand extended toward me, palm up, as if in offering. On it lay a small black object, a wireless camera. "Found it," he whispered, his voice surprisingly gentle. "In the walls, watching me, watching us." As my vision adjusted to the darkness, I saw what I had missed before, the raw, bleeding fingertips torn from scratching at the walls, the same walls where I'd been hearing sounds for weeks. I realized then what had truly been watching whom all along. The knife remained at his side as he carefully placed the camera on my nightstand. "I removed them all," he said with strange pride. "You're safe now." He turned and left as silently as he had appeared, leaving behind only wet footprints and the lingering scent of damp earth. By morning, I had convinced myself it was a dream, until I saw the camera, still sitting on my nightstand, its lens cracked and covered in plaster dust. I still live in the Pine Street house. I still hear scratching in the walls at night. But now I understand. He isn't watching me. He's protecting me from what is. The weight of being watched presses down like a physical thing. At first, it's just a tingling at the back of your neck, a moment when you glance up suddenly, certain someone's eyes are on you. But over time, that sensation becomes a constant companion, a shadow that never leaves, even in the darkest hours of night. We'd been in Oak Ridge condominiums for exactly 17 days when I first noticed her. Sarah and I had chosen this place for its tranquility, its safe reputation, the mature trees that lined the walkways, and the promise of peaceful evenings on our small patio. The realtor had emphasized how many of the residents were retired couples or established families. The perfect place to start our life together. That morning, while making coffee, I glanced up through our kitchen window and caught sight of her. A thin woman with gray-streaked hair pulled tight against her scalp, standing motionless on her balcony directly above our unit. She wasn't doing anything particularly strange, just standing there, hands resting on the railing, gaze fixed downward toward our yard. When I raised my hand in greeting, she nodded once, but didn't smile or wave back. Sarah thought I was overreacting when I mentioned it later. Our upstairs neighbor was probably just enjoying the morning air, she said. Not everyone needs to be excessively friendly. I agreed, feeling foolish for my unease. 3 days later, The first note appeared in our mailbox. Handwritten on pale blue stationery, the message simply read, "You left your bedroom light on until 2:17 a.m. Sleep is important for newlyweds." No signature. The precise time made my stomach tighten. I crumpled the note before Sarah could see it, suddenly ashamed without understanding why. The knocking began a week later, 3 sharp raps at our door at 5:36 a.m. My heart hammering in my chest, I stumbled from bed to answer it. She stood there in a neatly pressed house dress, smiling with too many teeth. She introduced herself as Eleanor and apologized for the early hour, explaining that she'd baked too many blueberry muffins and thought we might enjoy some for breakfast. The muffins looked perfect, almost artificial. I accepted them with mumbled thanks, my tongue thick with sleep and unease. As I began to close the door, her fingers gripped the edge with surprising strength, and she told me she'd noticed I liked to read late into the night. She could recommend better lighting to protect my eyes. My throat constricted at the realization that she'd been watching our bedroom window. Sarah found the incident amusing rather than concerning. She suggested that Eleanor was probably just lonely, perhaps recently widowed. The muffins remained untouched on our counter until I threw them away the next day. The incidents escalated gradually. Eleanor would appear in the hallway whenever we left our apartment, always with a reason that seemed plausible on the surface. Checking her mail, watering the small plant by her door, returning from a walk. But the timing was too perfect, the coincidences too frequent. My skin crawled whenever I felt her eyes on me. At night, I began hearing soft footsteps above our bedroom, pacing in perfect time with our movements. When we settled into bed, the footsteps would stop, replaced by a faint creaking directly overhead, as if someone was lying down in the exact position of our bed. Sometimes, I swore I could hear breathing through the ceiling. I started researching Eleanor online without telling Sarah. Property records showed she'd lived in the building for 9 years, occupying 3 different units during that time, always moving to whatever unit became vacant, directly above new tenants. A deep dive into public records revealed 2 restraining orders from former residents, both citing harassment and stalking behavior. My hands trembled as I read the complaints. Eleanor had allegedly installed listening devices in one couple's apartment. Another resident claimed she'd broken into their unit while they were at work and rearranged personal items. Both cases had been settled out of court, with Eleanor agreeing to maintain distance from the complainants. Both couples had moved out shortly after. I showed Sarah my findings that evening. For the first time, real fear flickered across her face. She admitted that she'd been finding small objects moved in our apartment, her jewelry arranged in different patterns, books removed from shelves and replaced at slight angles. She'd assumed it was her own forgetfulness or my doing. We agreed to speak with building management the next day. That night, we woke simultaneously at 3:14 a.m. to the sound of something being slid under our door. Heart pounding, mouth dry as paper, I crept to the entryway. A single photograph lay on the floor, a picture of Sarah and me asleep in our bed, taken from above. On the back, in the same handwriting as the note, "You look so peaceful when you dream." Management was sympathetic, but unhelpful. Without proof of illegal entry, they couldn't evict Eleanor. They suggested changing our locks, installing a security system. Their eyes held something I recognized. They knew about Eleanor, but were somehow powerless against her. We invested in cameras for our apartment the same day. While installing one in the hallway outside our door, I discovered something that sent ice through my veins. A tiny lens embedded in the smoke detector opposite our apartment. Further inspection revealed 3 more hidden cameras in the common areas, all positioned to monitor our movements. The police took the cameras as evidence, but warned us that proving who installed them would be difficult. They took our statement with practiced neutrality that suggested they'd heard similar complaints before. One officer recommended documenting everything and pursuing a restraining order. That night, the footsteps above us were more frantic, more deliberate. The ceiling creaked and groaned as if under the weight of someone pacing furiously. At midnight, our power went out, just our unit, none of the others in the building. In the sudden darkness, I heard a sound that froze my blood, the soft click of our front door lock disengaging. Sarah gripped my arm, her nails digging into my flesh. I fumbled for my phone, activating the flashlight just as our door began to open slowly. The beam caught Eleanor's face, distorted by the angle and shadows. Her expression wasn't threatening or malicious. It was hungry, desperately curious, as if we were exotic creatures she needed to study up close. I shouted for her to leave. She tilted her head, studying my fear with clinical detachment. After what felt like minutes, she simply nodded and pulled the door closed. We fled to a hotel that night. The restraining order was granted the next day. We broke our lease despite the financial penalty. 3 months have passed since we moved to a secured apartment building across town. Sarah says she feels safe here. I try to believe her, to believe in our fresh start. But sometimes, catching movement from the corner of my eye, I turn to find our new upstairs neighbor watching me from her balcony. She's younger than Eleanor, with dark hair instead of gray, but her gaze holds the same intensity, the same hunger, and sometimes, in the dark hours before dawn, I wake to the sound of footsteps pacing overhead, matching our movements exactly. The walls in Greystone Heights weren't supposed to be this thin. When I signed the lease on my townhouse in this exclusive neighborhood, the realtor had emphasized privacy and tranquility as selling points. Premium construction, soundproofed units, peace of mind. 3 weeks in, I knew better. The sounds that emanated from my neighbor's basement made sure of that. It started with the trucks, always after midnight, always with their headlights dimmed. The first time I noticed one, I was up late unpacking boxes in my home office. The rumble of a diesel engine drew me to the window, where I watched men in dark coveralls unload what appeared to be construction materials into Mr. Whitmore's side entrance. Nothing unusual about renovations, I told myself, just odd timing. By the second week, the pattern was unmistakable. 3 nights a week, always between 1 and 3 a.m., always followed by mechanical whirring that vibrated through our shared wall. The first time Whitmore caught me watching from my window, he waved with exaggerated friendliness. The next morning, he appeared at my door with an expensive bottle of scotch, apologizing for the noise from what he called his ongoing basement project. I nodded and smiled, noting the way his eyes never quite met mine. He explained that he worked unusual hours as a materials consultant and used nights for his hobby, home improvement. Something in his too wide smile made my stomach tighten. When he asked if I'd like to come over for drinks sometime, my mouth went dry. I heard myself decline, citing unpacked boxes and work deadlines. That night, the sounds changed. Beneath the mechanical drone came something rhythmic, metallic, purposeful. I pressed my ear against our shared wall, feeling the vibration against my cheek. My breathing quickened as I realized the sound followed a pattern. 3 long pulses, 2 short, pause, repeat. Not construction, something else. I began documenting everything: dates, times, descriptions of visitors. Most wore similar industrial coveralls without company logos. They never spoke loudly enough for me to hear, but their body language suggested urgency. Whitmore always greeted them with the same artificial smile he'd given me, ushering them quickly to the basement entrance. The smell came next, acrid and chemical. It seeped through my bathroom vent one Tuesday night, jolting me awake. My eyes watered as I stumbled to open windows, my throat burning. When I confronted Whitmore the next day, he seemed prepared with an explanation about a plumbing issue and chemical drain cleaner. He apologized profusely, suggesting the ventilation systems must be connected somewhere. The perfectly rehearsed response made my skin crawl. My investigation intensified. I began walking my dog on irregular schedules, mapping the exterior of Whitmore's property. From the street, nothing seemed unusual. From the wooded area behind our homes, I discovered something different, a section of foundation that didn't match the rest. Newer concrete, a slim ventilation pipe, expertly camouflaged among drainage systems. Most telling, a steel door, painted to match the foundation, nearly invisible unless you knew to look for it. I debated contacting the police, but hesitated. What could I report? Strange noises? Late-night deliveries? A neighbor who liked his privacy? I had nothing concrete, and Whitmore, with his expensive suits and connections to local officials, which he'd casually mentioned during our brief conversations, would likely dismiss any investigation before it began. Then Whitmore disappeared. 5 days without a sign of him. No lights, no cars, no deliveries. Just silence. By the 3rd day of his absence, the scratching began. Faint at first, easily dismissible as house settling or tree branches. By the 5th night, the sound had become unmistakable. Something behind our shared wall was moving, scratching, searching. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. My hands trembled as I poured my morning coffee. Dark circles formed under my eyes as I stared at the wall for hours, tracking the sounds as they moved, seemingly responding when I shifted position. Once, I swear I heard my name whispered through the drywall. On the 6th day, I made my decision. I packed an overnight bag, called a locksmith to change my locks, and contacted a private investigator, not the police. As I waited for the locksmith to arrive, a text message from an unknown number appeared on my phone. Basement project complete. Thank you for your patience, neighbor. My blood ran cold. I hadn't given Whitmore my number. Minutes later, I heard his front door open. Through my peephole, I watched Whitmore return, looking refreshed, carrying groceries as if he'd simply been on vacation. Behind him walked 3 men I'd never seen before, all in casual clothes, all scanning the street with practiced precision. That night, the sound stopped completely. The wall between our homes felt different, deader somehow, as if something much thicker than drywall now separated us. When I pressed my ear against it, I heard nothing, not even the normal sounds of occupation you'd expect from an adjoining home. The following morning, Whitmore knocked on my door, holding a folder of papers. With that same artificial smile, he explained that his company was interested in purchasing my unit for significantly above market value. As he spoke, I noticed fresh bandages on his fingertips, poorly concealed by flesh-colored adhesive. Behind him, in his now open doorway, stood one of the men from yesterday, watching me with flat, patient eyes. From the depths of Whitmore's home came the faint but unmistakable scent of the same chemicals that had woken me nights before. I didn't take his offer. Not yet. but I sleep with a chair against my bedroom door now. And every night, I swear the wall between our homes moves, just slightly, bulging inward as if something is testing its strength. Whatever Whitmore built in his basement, I'm increasingly certain it wasn't meant to stay there.